Imagine waking up to
Thank you,
find that the
Chairman.
nation's top
I
law
now
enforcement
recognize the
officer has
ranking
gone on
member of the
television not to
subcommittee,
talk about
Jasmine Crockett.
justice, not to
Thank you
talk
so much,
about
Mr.
protecting
Chairman.
the people,
And
but to
I
take
first
aim
just
at a
want to
sitting member
begin
of
with a
Congress,
news
going
alert.
so far that her
Guess
words are
what?
perceived
Joe
as a
Biden
personal
is not
threat.
the president
Think about
anymore.
the weight that carries.
So maybe
This
we
isn't
can move
just a
on. Maybe we
disagreement
can
on
move into the
policy.
present
This is the
because it
person
seems like we
entrusted
are
with
living in the
upholding the
past.
law,
And
appearing
listen,
to
these are not the
weaponize
good
her
old
authority
days, you know,
against
like
those
you
who
used to
dare
sit
to speak
around and your
freely.
grandparents
And in that
would talk
moment,
to you about
millions of
what
viewers
used to
watching at
happen.
home are left
What we need to
wondering
be
if
talking
someone at
about
that
is
level
how
can
we
do
are
this
going
on
to
live
legislate,
TV.
because I
What
think
does
that
it
some of my
mean for the
colleagues
safety of
have
every elected
confused what our
leader?
jobs are.
Thank the chairman. I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Jasmine Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I first just want to begin with a news alert. Guess what? Joe Biden is not the president anymore. So maybe we can move on. Maybe we can move into the present, because it seems like we are living in the past. And listen, these are not the good old days, you know, like you used to sit around and your grandparents would talk to you about what used to happen. What we need to be talking about is how we are going to legislate, because I think that some of my colleagues have confused what our jobs are. And I get that we're sitting in judiciary. And so it may seem as if we are here to be litigators, but we are here to be legislators, which means that we are supposed to be writing laws, not trying to have our own trials and determine whether or not something is true or not, or whatever the case is, or who should be sued, who shouldn't be sued. All I know is that a great American hero, a good senator out of New Jersey, said something to the effect yesterday as he was shattering the record for holding the floor, a record that had been held by another racist in this country. As he shattered that, he said something about the fact that this should not be about left versus right. It should be about right versus wrong. And I am going to tell you that I want us to focus on right versus wrong. The reason that we are struggling right now in this country as it relates to people not trusting agencies, honestly, a lot of it is because of elected leaders. Let me tell you, one of the things that the chairman and I actually agree upon, we don't agree on a lot, is that we both know that there has been a sharp incline as it relates to threats upon our lives. Regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, we both know and agree that as sitting members of Congress, we both are enduring more death threats than anybody should in this country. And I believe that it is because of the divisive rhetoric, and it is because of the selective enforcement of things. And so when we have, and I'm gonna be clear, because I had remarks and I'm going a whole other way. To have the sitting attorney general go on, and I'm gonna call it faux news. I know some of y'all love it, but it's fake to me. To have her go on Fox News and to then decide that she wanted to send a threat to me, it was wrong. Because here it is, she is the highest law enforcement agent in this country, and people are watching and they are consuming this information, and they are believing that simply because I decided that I wanted to exercise my right to free speech, which I am not abridged from doing, that she then wanted to then politicize something that should not be politicized. I don't like Elon Musk. I'm gonna say it 50,000 times. I don't like him. I don't like that he going out there and he firing people. I think that he's a crook, because somehow the rest of us can't sit around and get whatever federal contracts we want. The rest of us can't sit around and get law enforcement and get them somehow ordained as federal law enforcement to protect him. The rest of us can't get our dealerships protected by the federal government. That is somebody that is operating above the law. For whatever reason, just because he has a lot of money, more money than everybody else. And yes, I am happy to see that on my birthday, which is what I said, there were peaceful protests around this world against him, because he is a problem. And so you never should have somebody that is sitting that high and is going to sit up here and threaten a sitting member of Congress when she knew good and well, if she watched the entire thing, that I specifically told protesters to make sure you consult with lawyers, just like I've told protesters over and over and over in the history of me advising people to go out and exercise their constitutional right. The fact that there are other sitting members that have received letters of threat from this new DOJ tells me that they are about retribution and they are not about following the law. The reason that our party, or I won't even say our party, our country is torn apart is because we can't even agree on right versus wrong. This should not be left versus right. The only thing that we're asking is that we have law enforcement that will show up when there is an actual crime. If somebody calls and says, hey, I need you to investigate this cyber crime, or I need you to investigate this child pornography, or I need you to investigate this robbery, then we want somebody to show up, and we don't want them to look at us and act as if just because I'm black or because I'm woman, that I am not worthy of having that case investigated, because we have an administration that is continuously railing against diversity, equity, and inclusion, or we don't need people that show up that feel like diversity should not be valued. That is why we should have somebody that may show up and looks like me. The final thing that I'll say, because you've been gracious, is this. When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black. Charlie looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, let me tell you something. When I walk in, I'm going to walk in with a level of rapport and understanding that maybe some of my other colleagues will not. Charlie offered me my job, and I worked my butt off, and I worked really, really hard for all of my clients, not just those that look like me, and that is what it looks like to serve. Thank you.
What does it mean for the safety of every American? That's where Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett drew the line, firing back with a blistering response that wasn't just about her own safety but about accountability, trust, and the very foundation of democracy itself. She made it clear this was not politics as usual. This was something deeper, something more dangerous. When the country's most powerful legal figure goes on national television to attack and intimidate, the ripple effects can't be ignored. For Crockett, it wasn't just her name being dragged, it was a message to anyone who might dare to challenge authority, and she wasn't about to let that slide. She looked directly at the reality. Threats against lawmakers are already on the rise, and the last thing this country needs is an attorney general adding fuel to that fire. Crockett reminded everyone that this isn't a partisan talking point. She and the committee's chairman don't agree on much, but they do agree on one sobering fact: the number of death threats against members of Congress has spiked dramatically. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, it doesn't matter. Public officials across the board are facing hostility like never before. That shared reality highlights why rhetoric like Bondi's is so dangerous. Words from the top don't just vanish into the air, they shape the environment, they embolden extremists. And Crockett knew she had to call it out. But she didn't stop at pointing out the threat, she tied it to a larger pattern that Americans can no longer ignore. She accused the Justice Department of something chilling: selective enforcement. Instead of protecting citizens equally, she claimed the system is being used as a tool of retribution. Think about that for a second. Law enforcement isn't supposed to play favorites. It isn't supposed to go easier on some and harder on others based on politics, race, or personal grudges. Yet Crockett argued that's exactly what's happening, and that is where trust in government begins to collapse. But that wasn't the only example she had up her sleeve. She turned her sights on one of the most controversial names in America today, Elon Musk. In her view, Musk represents the glaring double standard that ordinary Americans see every day. She blasted him for mass layoffs, for hoarding contracts, for receiving protections most businesses could never dream of. She painted a picture of a billionaire operating above the law simply because of his money and influence. And she pointed to her own birthday as an unlikely milestone, thousands of peaceful protesters around the globe using that day to push back against Musk, a symbolic reminder that power doesn't always get the final word. The point was clear: if billionaires and political elites can bend the rules to protect themselves while everyday citizens face harsh consequences for far less, then justice in America is no longer blind. But Crockett didn't just stop at criticizing the wealthy. She pulled the curtain back on how these double standards poison the very core of law enforcement. She argued that law enforcement resources should be directed where they matter most: investigating cybercrime, fighting child predators, responding to robberies, protecting communities. Instead, she warned, bias and political vendettas are driving decisions, And that, she said, is why diversity, equity, and inclusion matter. If the people making those decisions all look the same, all think the same, and all dismiss certain communities as unworthy, then justice will never be fair. She warned against rolling back progress, against dismissing the need for representation, because to her it isn't symbolic, it's survival. But rather than leave this as an abstract point, Crockett drove it home with a personal story. She went back to the very start of her career, when she was applying for a job as a public defender. She didn't have criminal defense experience, but she had something else. She told her boss Charlie straight up, "Hire me because I'm black." At first he thought she was joking, but she explained walking into a courtroom with her background meant she could connect with clients in ways her peers couldn't. She could understand struggles they faced, build trust others couldn't, and fight for justice with a perspective shaped by lived experience. And that's exactly what she did. She worked hard not just for clients who looked like her, but for every single client who needed someone in their corner. That story wasn't just a memory, it was a lesson. Representation in government and law enforcement isn't about quotas or politics. It's about building a system that truly serves the people, all of the people. From there, Crockett zoomed out to the bigger picture: checks and balances. She reminded the country that no one is above the law, not billionaires, not officials, not even attorneys general. When a top law enforcement officer uses her platform to threaten a member of Congress, it isn't just a personal spat, it's an attack on the delicate balance of powers that keeps our democracy intact. The executive branch enforces the laws, Congress writes them, the judiciary interprets them. If one branch starts intimidating another, that balance cracks. And when it cracks, the people lose. But Crockett's message wasn't just about warning, it was about accountability. She said the real danger comes when accountability disappears, when those in power stop being held to the same rules as everyone else, and that's when democracy starts to die. Her speech was a rallying cry: the health of our system doesn't depend on party loyalty, it depends on principle. Fairness, integrity, transparency, those aren't partisan ideas, they're the foundation of freedom. And when those values are threatened, it isn't just lawmakers who suffer, it's every citizen who counts on justice being applied equally. By the end, Crockett had woven a powerful narrative. She connected the immediate threat from Bondi to the larger trend of selective enforcement, billionaire privilege, and the erosion of trust in law enforcement. She tied it back to her own lived experience, showing how diversity strengthens justice rather than weakens it. And she finished with a clear message: America deserves leaders who serve with integrity, who protect the people rather than threaten them, and who remember that no one is above the law. That's the bigger lesson here. This wasn't just about one TV interview, it was about what kind of government we want to have, what kind of leadership we demand, and whether we're willing to stand up when those lines are crossed. Crockett's words weren't just aimed at one official, they were aimed at all of us, challenging every viewer to think about what accountability means in their own democracy. And that's where you come in, because conversations like this can't stop here. If you believe leaders should be held accountable, if you think fairness and transparency matter, then you have a role to play. Share this video so more people hear the message, drop a comment with your thoughts so the conversation grows, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future breakdowns of the stories that shape our democracy, because the fight for justice doesn't end with one speech, it continues with all of us standing up, paying attention, and refusing to accept anything less than integrity from those in power.